Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Kim. I'm the Children and Young Adult Consultant, and I'm quickly about to turn today's session over to Jane, Andrea, and Nicole. They're going to be presenting to us on the transition from birth to 3 to public schools. And I have seen this presentation. It is amazing and super helpful for everyone to know a little bit about it. So Jane, Andrea, Nicole, thank you guys for giving us a piece of your morning, and the show's all yours.
Thank you so much, Kim. I think we should probably start with introducing ourselves. I'm Andrea Brinnel. I'm from the Connecticut State Department of Education, where I'm the IDEA Part B coordinator. And what that means in just normal words, it means that I have responsibilities for preschool special education. I also have some responsibilities for early childhood general education at the department as well. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jane.
Hey everybody, I'm Jane Hampton. I work for the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center. And I don't know how many of you know the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, but we have great resources that you can tap into for the families that you serve. And our role is we're a parent training and information center under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which means we provide information on special education to families and to professionals when they call. And we certainly we partner with a lot of community groups and people like librarians to bring information to families into your library. So please use my email and ask for resources whenever you need them. And I will be putting some in the chat as we go. Something that Kimberly shared with me before we go on is that you guys had a sparkler presentation. And we do have a sparkler presentation next week, which can be for families. So I'm going to give you that flyer. So if you want to share it with any families that might benefit, you will have it. And I know that you guys now know what that means. So thank you. Nicole?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Cossette. I'm the IDEA Part C coordinator, and that is Connecticut's Birth to 3 system. I work in the Office of Early Childhood, which is located in Hartford, and I oversee early intervention for the state.
We know that you guys are muted. So if you want to put in the chat with the communities that you come from, that would be really helpful for us. And if there's anything about your role that you want to talk about, feel free to throw that in the chat for us too. Thank you.
So while you're doing that, I'll give you a quick overview about what we're going to present for you today. We're going to do a quick overview of Connecticut's Birth to 3 system. We're going to talk about the transition from early intervention, which is Part C, to Part B, which is preschool special ed. I know C doesn't come before B in the alphabet. It's just how, the order in which the laws were created, but it is C to B transition. We're going to talk a little bit about, just at a very high level, the processes and procedures. In my slides, there's probably going to be way more information than things you wanted to know about preschool special ed, but we figured we would leave them in the presentation. So if you ever wanted to go back and do a little bit more digging or have a little bit more detail, you'll have it there. We're going to talk about the responsibilities and the roles, both for birth to 3, for early intervention, for school districts. Jane is going to talk, infuse quite a bit about families and parents into our conversation today, and some frequently asked questions. And there's 22 of us. So if you have questions, we've done this presentation many, many times. Just raise your hand and we'd be happy to call on you and ask you to unmute, and you can ask your question, or you can put it in the chat and Kim will let us know that you have a question.
I am the acronym person. So we shared some acronyms with you guys. You may want to do a screenshot if that would be helpful for you. We know that this language, this jargon is not your jargon. And so we wanted to share what some of the things that might show up on your screen. I don't know how many people know RESC if you guys are from all over the state. So you might know ACEs, CREC, LEARN is on the shoreline. Ed Advance is in Litchfield County. Those are our state. We have 6 regional educational service centers. We've mentioned the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. These are all the terms that we use. Andrea works for the State Department. Nicole works for OEC. So these might come up through our conversation. We just wanted to make sure you had access to what they meant.
Jane, before we go on to the next slide, I'm going to spring this on you. Could you explain, because CPAC is the Connecticut Parents Advocacy Center, and I think people get confused by your name a little bit. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what CPAC is?
Because of the advocacy in our title? Sure. Thank you. So I do think it would be helpful for you guys to understand what we do. We are a parent training and information center. We do not do advocacy, so to speak. We really help families understand how to advocate effectively for their children and be collaborative members of their school team. So advocate can have a really negative connotation for some people, a little bit more adversarial. That is very contrary to our mission, which is to serve both families and school staff to work together in partnership. So thanks, Andrea, for that opportunity. And we do that with birth to 3 providers too.
And that is a great segue into some of the birth to 3 topics that we'll review today. First, I want to point you to our birth to 3 timeline for Connecticut. So this timeline dates back to 1993, but I'm going to highlight some of the major topics throughout. So one of the things that I'd like to highlight is in 2021, we implemented early intervention services over 3, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. We also, through legislation, ended the family cost participation. That family cost participation began in 2017 and then was taken out of statute. So we no longer charge family fees. Additionally, we had a couple of lead agency changes. So if you talk to someone who had been part of early intervention previous to 2017, they may have referenced at one point we were under SDE, but the latest lead agency is really the Office of Early Childhood. Additionally, just for your information, I want to share with you our website, and I'll post this in the chat at the end. On our website, you will find policy and procedures, service guidelines. You'll also be able to find out what provider supports each town. And that could be done by comprehensive and a specialty. So currently we have some programs that also support children who are diagnosed with autism or deaf and hard of hearing supports. On the town pages, you'll also find links to the early childhood special education contacts in each town and the family guides. So there are also a lot of great information under for families, which you'll see after referrals. And that will also lead you to a great one on transition. And just to ground us, since 1993, the Connecticut's mission statement has been to strengthen the capacity of Connecticut's families to meet the developmental and health-related needs of their infants and toddlers who have had developmental delays or disabilities, which leads into our uniform message, which birth to 3 is supporting families to enhance the development of their child and connect to their communities. One thing I want to highlight and ask you here is, how is this different than schools? So start to think about that as we move on throughout the presentation. And Jane, it looked like you were going to hop in. I don't know if you had something to say or if it was just.
Exactly what you just said. Think about how this is different from the schools. Thanks, Nicole.
Perfect. We're on the same wavelength then. So I have a question for you, you all, and you can put this into the chat or raise your hand, unmute yourself. But the question is, what is birth to 3? Do you think it's a system or a program? And I see Andrea already posted our link to our website in the chat. So thank you, Andrea. See a program. It looks like we are overwhelmingly responding with program. I see a combination of both. I do see a system, which if you answered system, that would be correct. And this is a slide that we do put in here because a lot of people think it's a program, but really early intervention is a system that contracts with programs. So what this means is it's all birth to 3 to most families. So sometimes we'll receive phone calls from families and say, I'm enrolled in birth to 3 and I need, and they'll put whatever their need is, whether it be I want to refer, or I don't know which program I'm in, or I have a question about my IFSP, and they'll call us at the OEC. And we're able to direct the family, but a lot of the times they don't know that, for example, one of our programs is Sarah Kid Steps. They may not know that they're part of Sarah Kid Steps and receiving early intervention through that contracted program. They'll just think it's birth to 3. But birth to 3 is really a system. And one thing that you'll want to know is knowing the names of the programs that support the families in your town will be really essential in helping families. So as I said, there are 19 programs that contract with the Office of Early Childhood to provide early intervention supports to families. So on this screen, you'll see birth to 3, a view from 10,000 feet. You'll see the OEC in the top left. You'll see those 19 programs. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see something that looks like a playground, a dog park, camping, a house, an apartment building. And what this represents is early intervention is provided in the natural learning environment. So that could be the family's home. It could be the local playground that the family attends. It could be a restaurant, a grocery store. It really is anywhere. And then in the center, you'll see a computer screen. And what that represents is in 2020, we implemented remote early intervention, which is here to stay. It initially was fully remote during the pandemic because obviously it was unsafe to be in person at that point, but we have since transitioned to a blend of both. Right now, it's about 86% in-person supports, with the remainder being remote supports. A lot of that is family choice, or if there are exposures, we can switch to remote supports versus in-person so that the family still is receiving their early intervention that is outlined on their IFSP and not miss. And that's all based on family choice with the remote EI. But we do have that, and it is here to stay. But typically supports are done in person in that natural learning environment. And another thing I also want to highlight is remote EI is still done in that natural learning environment. So the family's still at home. The early interventionist is still able to support the family in that environment as well. So now that we have a overview of the system, I'm going to review how families get referred quickly, a little bit about our evaluation, and then a little bit about what birth to 3 looks like. And I will not do it justice by any stretch of the truth, because these could be day-long presentations or hour-long presentations on our referral evals and what supports look like. So again, our website has a lot of information, and you can always reach out to any one of us if you have further questions. And we have some recordings on our website, but I'll do a quick overview. How families get referred. One thing that I'd like to highlight is that anyone can refer a child. However, the family must agree to the evaluation and be present at the evaluation. We do have a single point of entry, so that's 211 Child Development, and people can make a referral by calling in that number 800-505-7000. You could also download an online referral form and fax that in. Most calls are made by families based on their pediatrician's recommendation, but we do see some referrals come in through pediatricians. DCF workers sometimes will submit a referral, childcare, but most are made by families. Once a child is referred and the family accepts the referral, there will be an evaluation. And the evaluation encompasses 2 early intervention professionals. So that could be occupational therapist, a physical therapist, teacher, speech and language pathologist, or any other of the professionals working as an early interventionist. And it's an activity-based discussion based on a standardized norm referencing tool. And that looks at self-help skills, personnel, social skills, motor skills, that's including fine and gross motor, communication, and cognitive. And there's also a health history, nutrition, vision, and hearing. Additionally, if the child is over 16 months, there will be an MCHAT to assess the if there is a concern for autism. Once a child is determined eligible, oh, I would be remiss, actually, I'm going to back up to eval. We do, on our website, you'll find what would deem a child eligible. We do have a narrow eligibility in Connecticut, so that is 2 standard deviations from the norm in one area of development, or 1.5 standard deviations from the norm in 2 areas of development, or there is a list of ICD-10s that are automatically eligible for our system, and you'll find that list on our website. So once the child's determined eligible, they will move into supports, and our supports look like they are in a natural learning environment, so they're encompassing of natural learning environment practices. We utilize a primary service provider approach to teaming and then coaching as a style of interaction. And what we found and what research has supported is that when all 3 of these work together, there's increased participation and confidence and competence in both the parent and child. And because we focus on families, we really emphasize that increased confidence and competence in parents. So that is that focus, and then that trickles down to the child as well. So what is a natural learning environment? I kind of spoke to that a little bit, but they are learning opportunities in everyday family life, so that the goal here is to increase the child participation and families working with the child in their everyday activities. And that starts with the activity and not the skill, so you'll build upon the skill set around whatever that activity is for the family. Research has supported, and we know learning opportunities are present in all areas. And this really ultimately builds that caregiver competence with strategies, and it leads to that skill development and increased participation for a child. And I can talk about that for hours, but one of the slides that I do love, and it emphasizes this and why it's so important, is this piece of research about how children learn through an incredible amounts of practice. So Karen Adolph wrote on the typically developing toddlers and found that on average, toddlers practice for 3 to 6 months to learn how to walk. And that leads to them walking 9,000 steps, which equates to 29 football fields per day. So that's an incredible amount of practice. I don't think any of us are walking 29 football fields a day, but that is what it takes to learn how to walk and really hone in on that skill. So that is why this is needed to get into everyday routine with familiar people around the child, because the children aren't going to do 29 football fields walking in an hour session with an early interventionist. So allowing the parent to know what to do and how to help their child develop and learn really embeds that from the week to week, so that that can continue to practice. So really allowing the parents and building that confidence and competence. A lot of this is done through coaching. So this is a practitioner and the parent working together. And it looks at all learning opportunities, and that ultimately leads to the skill development. So it's based on a style of interaction and builds that family's confidence. It supports the parents, and it is based on parent ideas. And it shares information and modeling. So one thing we've heard is that coaching is couching and early intervention is hands-off, and that's not the case. We're using coaching as a style of interaction, and I want to highlight that style of interaction to help parents. But that doesn't mean that the expertise is not shared. So a physical therapist might share information and model things for the family. So it's as hands-on as it needs to be. That's one thing I like to hit home. And it's really that style of interaction versus a couching model. So an early interventionist isn't going into the home and just hands off, sitting down, telling the parent what to do or what have you. It really is helping the family with the parent in the center, but also sharing information and modeling as needed. I'm not going to share it here, but this YouTube video is posted on our website and also embedded in the presentation that I can share after. And that video outlines what coaching is, in much more detail, and it shows a family and how coaching might be seen with a family. So you'll get a better idea. Oop, there we go. And lastly, I spoke quickly about the primary service provider approach to teaming. And one misconception here is that a PSP leads to a child or a family having only one interventionist, but really what this means is that every family, every child has a team. So one person is the primary support for the family, and other team members are meeting regularly to support that primary service provider and doing as many joint visits as necessary. And what a joint visit is say it's an OT working with the family and there's some motor skills that are coming in and they would like to consult with the PT, they will do a joint visit. So the OT and PT will go out and have a visit with the family at that point. So it really does not mean that only one person is involved with that child or family. So every family has that full team. And this is done through team meetings as well. So the team will meet outside and then also using those joint visits. One thing I also want to highlight on this is that there is a need for flexible scheduling. So early interventionists might go out early mornings or late at night to really meet the family's need. It's not necessarily an 8 to 4 job. It could be scattered throughout the day.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when a child is about to turn 3. So that's what we had mentioned in our overview is going to be about that transition, again, from Part C, early intervention, to Part B, preschool special education. So when a child's about to turn 3, there's notification that's sent to the school district at age 2.5 through our data system. And you may hear, if you're working with anybody in public schools, we are about to change our IEP and data system. Few little growing pains with that, but the information is sent through that data system to the public school. We are required to include actually it's the service coordinators are included in the school, in the transition planning. Parents do give consent for that when they do the referral over to the public schools. And then the bottom line is that if a child is eligible for Part B services, the school district is required to provide it. You'll often hear FAPE or FAPE in the LRE or FAPE at 3 when we're referring to little kids. What that means is a free and appropriate public education by the time a child turns 3 if they are eligible and they have been referred from early intervention. So Nicole and Jane have heard me say this a million times. This is my favorite slide because I like to think about the transition from Part C to Part B. They're both fruit, they're both IDEA, but they're still a little bit different. One's an apple, one's an orange. But we need to combine the two of them and think about the two of them together. And that's really important when it comes to thinking about how families experience this transition from, an apple to an orange. It's still IDEA, but there are different twists and turns and requirements for each. For instance, Nicole mentioned eligibility for birth to 3, that it's very strict as far as how many standard deviations or if you're on a list of these disabilities. For Part B, we don't have that list of disabilities. In order to be eligible for special education, you have to be found eligible in one of the 13 federal disability categories or the special early childhood category that's in Connecticut statute of developmental delay and require specialized instruction. There is no list to say, for instance, if you have Down syndrome, you're automatically eligible for preschool special education. So that's just an example of a difference. And I'm going to turn it over to Jane so she can talk to you a little bit more about the family experience of this transition.
Thanks, Andrea. So I asked when we were putting this slide presentation together from the very beginning for a Cliff video or a Cliff visual, because that is the typical term that families use when they leave birth to 3 and go to preschool, is they feel like they fell off a cliff. So if we think about that for a minute, if you are a family in birth to 3, you are a family in birth to 3, you, the parent, meet with the provider and your child and you work together. So if I'm having trouble in the grocery store, the provider goes with me to the grocery store, helps me figure out how to get through that grocery store without the challenges that my son is creating. When my child moves to preschool, nobody's coming with me to the grocery store. And I don't have that person in my life to help me figure out what bedtime is going to look like, because bedtime is a nightmare. That's what Birth to Three does for you, is you really look at your day and your life and say, how do we help this child be a part of it? How do we help them be successful in normal family routines and family activities? And that's super supportive because it's a family support. But now we go to preschool and that's a child support. That is very different. I put my child on a bus and they go to school and I don't see what's happening. That feels really disconnecting. So the idea of a high quality transition is to prevent that sense of falling off a cliff. The charge is really Birth to Three's charge to have a smooth transition so that this family and this child all move into the next phase a little smoother. And it's a challenge to make it happen. I think this particular training we did around the state in every corner for hundreds of people. And we really tried to give the message of, if the Birth to Three provider and the school is working together, that will really make that transition much smoother, much more smoothly. But it's also important that the parent be part of that. It's not just the providers that can make it go smoothly. Parents have a role in that also. And a lot of that is about attending meetings and communicating about what your needs are. And so as librarians, I imagine that you talk with families a lot about things that are happening in their life and helping them to understand it's really important to politely and respectfully let people know what you need. Let the Birth to Three provider know what you need. Let the preschool know what you need. But the point for this particular slide is that it is a really difficult time for families, and they can really use a lot of support from everyone to make this a smooth transition.
Thank you, Jane. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens in Part B, preschool special ed. So just wanted to let you know that anybody can make a referral to special education. You can make a referral, a grandparent can make a referral, a child care provider can make a referral, but the parent needs to give permission from the evaluation. So I think of that catchphrase, nothing about them without them. I would not recommend to anybody to make a referral without having a conversation with the family, because that can cause not great relationships to form when that does happen. And again, they need to give permission, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that if a family needs help making a referral as a librarian, you can actually say, you know, I'll do it with you, I'll do it, you know, and know that the family will have to give permission for the evaluation. So the next couple slides fall under the category of way too much information, but I wanted you to have a visual of sort of the balance between Birth to Three and LEA, which means a local education agency. It's another way of saying a school district. And I do see, like, I see an error in the slide already that I'm going to need to fix with our data system. But I just wanted you to see that it really is very sort of even on how that transition happens with the responsibilities between Birth to Three and the LEA, but there are separate and distinct responsibilities between the two sides. So that's just a little visual for you. The next slide, which is again, probably falls into the way too much information, but I wanted you to have it in case you ever want to go back or you have any questions about this process, or a parent is talking to you and they're talking about PPT1 and PPT2 and you just want to have a frame of reference. So PPT stands for a planning and placement team meeting. Just so you know, Connecticut is the only state that calls them that. So we have PPTs in Connecticut, but Connecticut is also notorious for having our own language and our own way of doing things. So if you hear a parent, again, talking about a PPT, what that means, it means that it's an IEP meeting. And first there's a referral. So the referral can be that transition from Birth to Three, or it can be a referral from a parent or from anybody else. But for today, we're going to talk about that transition from C to B. So there's that referral that's made in advance of the child's 3rd birthday, because remember, one of the sort of the bottom line is we have to have that FAPE at 3, the free and appropriate public education for those children referred from Part C to Part B, if they are eligible. Then a PPT is scheduled, a planning and placement team meeting, in which the parent is a member of that PPT, birth to 3 is a member of that PPT, and a parent can bring anyone that they choose to a PPT. So if a parent asks you and you would like to go to the PPT with them, they certainly can ask you or anybody else that they want to support them. The PPT is going to discuss the referral. They are going to decide if any additional evaluations need to be done. Sometimes when kids transition from Part C to Part B, Part C has done recent evaluations and the team can say, we have enough information to determine eligibility. Otherwise, the PPT will discuss what other questions do we need to have answered and what assessment tools should we do in order to do that. And if there's enough information, they're just going to go right into PPT2. If not, they're then going to schedule the planning and placement team 2. And that's going to be to look at the evaluation results and determine if the child meets, again, one of those 13 federal categories of disability, or more commonly for young children aged 3 to 5, falls into that category of developmental delay. Children can be in that special category that we have in Connecticut statute until they turn 6. Something that you may hear from a parent is that, my child received a diagnosis of autism, but when I met with the school, they picked developmental delay. That's important for you to know, because if you just think of this, my parallel is whatever box they check for a disability, think of that as the key to the front door of the house, and the house is special education. Once they have the key to the front door, they can go into any room that they need. So the box that's checked, especially for a young child, should not be driving the services. But I know that sometimes that's upsetting for families that, they are considering that their child has a particular disability, and then the district checks that developmental delay box. Just know that that should not change what the child receives, because again, that disability category is the key to the front door of the special ed house. And then we want that PPT to go into any room that that child needs to be able to design an individual education program. And that's what IEP stands for, that helps them access their education. So that's just, again, this is just a reference slide for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about, and Nicole and Jane, feel free to jump in anytime. We have a new option in Connecticut. So during the pandemic, we had an executive order from Governor Lamont that allowed children to continue in birth to 3 when they had birthdays on or before May 1st, all the way through till the beginning of the school year. And the reasoning for that is we know that a lot of transitions aren't good for little kids. We know that if a child doesn't qualify for extended school year services over the summer when school's not in regular session, that they may have a gap in their services between when birth to 3 ends and when Part C ends and when Part B starts at the beginning of school. Or if a child is eligible for extended school year services, let's say their birthday's in May. They may attend a preschool program in May and June, then attend a different extended school year program for July and August, then attend a different preschool program in September. And that goes back to, we know that that many transitions are not optimal for young children. They're probably not optimal for anybody, but especially for young children. So we were able to have this option created through an executive order. It was very successful, and we were able to have it put into statute as of it went into effect this past July. So in July of 2021, it became part of Connecticut state statute that we have this option of early intervention over 3. So in a nutshell, it gives parents the option of continuing birth to 3 services for any child born on or after May 1st until that school year starts. They will have a one-time option to make that choice. So when the school district still has to develop that individualized education program. They still have their individual family service plan from birth to 3. And when they have those 2 documents, like literally in their hands, the family can then make a decision about what's best for their child and their family. Do they want to remain with birth to 3 until the school year starts? In that case, birth to 3 will add goals and will add some goals with regard to pre-literacy and pre-numeracy. Or do they want to jump right into having their individualized education program implemented and go right into Part B? They can only make that decision once. So if they decide to stay with birth to 3, that's great. If at any point, even after they make that original decision, they can choose to go in Part B. But once they decide to go to the IEP portion, the IDEA Part B, preschool special ed, they can't change their mind and go back to Part C. So it really is that one-time election. Again, the important thing to know is that this should really be a family decision. We've been very, very clear with birth to 3 providers and with the local education agencies that neither side should exert any undue influence on the family. You know, for instance, wouldn't it be nice if they stayed in birth to 3 and that might have a benefit for the LEA, or the birth to 3 provider saying, we'd really like to keep your child in birth to 3. It really has to be giving the parents all the information they need to make that decision. I don't know, Jane or Nicole, if you have anything you'd like to add to the EI over 3 conversation?
Just the fact that it's so new, a lot of people don't know about it. And so now that you guys know about it, it might be something that you share with the families that you're talking to.
I was going to add that. And then also there in 2020, when it went under executive order, I believe it was May 5th when that executive order took place. So still being so new, you might hear May 5th and you might also hear May 1st. Statute is deriving on that May 1st. So it is May 1st. But if you hear May 5th, it's preceding that executive order. And it was May 5th at that point in time, but it will be, but
you're absolutely right, Nicole. I think it was because we had to, we intended on it
forward.
being May 1st, but it took a while to get the executive order signed. And there has been a little bit of confusion, but the important thing to know is that the current legislation is May 1st or after, with a birthday up to the beginning of the school year. And the reason why the legislation says until the beginning of the school year is we don't have a common school calendar in Connecticut. So different school districts, they all start around the same time, but not necessarily on exactly the same day. If there's ever any question with the family about early intervention over 3, there is information available on both the OEC website and the SDE website. And you will have all of our contact information. You can certainly drop any of us a line if you need any more information. It can be a little confusing because it's new, but it really is a wonderful opportunity. And not to toot our own horn, but at a national level, people really have looked to Connecticut saying, this is awesome. How do we do it too? Because it really is a good alternative. And it really speaks to Connecticut's value for family choice.
You know, I do want to add one more thing because I just think it's really interesting. My son is now 32. So birth to 3 was just starting to be birth to 3 when he was little, and we had it. And the same time, there wasn't necessarily a preschool in every building. And our town did not have a preschool in the building, a general ed preschool. So when my son turned 3 in March, which this did not exist then, the district did agree to contract with birth to 3 to continue him through September 1st or whatever the first day of school was, so that they had time to put together a program because they really weren't prepared for him. And it was one of the best things we ever did as a team to make that decision. So having personal experience with it, not having to have all those transitions Andrea talked about, it was I know we're not allowed to influence parents, but I would highly recommend it as a choice to reduce those transitions. Even when he had his first summer in the summer preschool, as Andrea said, the entire team was different than his regular preschool during the school year. And that was really very unsuccessful to make that transition. So there's a lot of positives about this new option.
There is, and and part of the not wanting to be an undue influence on families is there are some families who say, thank you very much, but we need the summer off. We're going to wherever, and we're going to be at our beach cottage, and we just need a break for a little while. So it really is based on whatever the family thinks is best for themselves and their child. And we just want to support them in giving them all the information they can have to be able to make that informed choice for their child and family. But you're right, Jane. I agree with everything Jane said. But we just want to be able to make sure that families have all that information so they can make that informed decision. Speaking of new things, if you're doing any work with school districts, you might notice all of the special education staff having sort of a hair on fire moment right now. It's because we are about to launch, as of July 1st, a new system, CTSEDS. It's our new IEP and special education data system. I just wanted to leave this slide in so you will know if you hear about it, or if you hear somebody like having a meltdown, you'll know what they're talking about with regard to CTSEDS. I do think it's going to take about a year for people to get used to having this new system, but it's going to be really helpful for everyone in the long run. But just so you know, if you're working with school districts, why things may seem a little bit stressful for them over the summer and in the fall. Next slide, please. So a little bit of guidance that we give to school districts from the Department of Ed is that we expect that school districts are going to do something called child find. They have to actually do outreach and look for children over and above those kiddos that are being referred from birth to 3. So they can mail things out, they can post things in the laundromat, they can give you things in the library. You can really be an important partner in these child find activities. So we tell districts it is best practice to reach out to families to let them know that their district is able to accept a referral, and you guys can be really, really important partners with this. That if a parent comes to you and says, I'm not sure about my child's development, or if they're at a play group at the library and you notice something and you have a conversation with the family, you can, again, I can't stress the importance of you being partners with these child find activities. It really would be helpful in every community.
You know what I like, Andrea, that I love that idea. And I think in addition to helping the families that come into your library, depending on where you are and what your relationship is, I don't see any reason why, as a librarian, you couldn't reach out to your community school and say, next time you're doing a preschool screening, which is what a lot of schools do, send me the flyer. I'll put it up. I'll make sure the families that come into our playgroup are aware of that. So it's okay to initiate that request. Let them know you care and you want to share that information with families. I'm not sure schools know how involved you are with the families, and you are.
And I see Patty has a question about homeschool families and pediatricians. We do have outreach. Public schools do have outreach to healthcare providers. I know we have a pediatrician on the Interagency Coordinating Council for Part C, and I attend those as well. I'm honestly not sure if homeschool families know about all this. Part of the district's responsibility, again, is to make sure that the community in general knows about this, whether their child is enrolled in a public school or not. Often what happens with homeschooled families, they can refer their child. The school district will then, if the child's eligible, write an individualized education program, and then the family will get to decide, is it best right now for my child to enroll in public school and get these services, or do I want to continue homeschooling? And it gives them that choice. So that goes back to, again, having parents have all that information and then being able to make the decision that's right for their child and their family.
And I just want to let people know, I put a CPAC poster in the chat if you ever want to just either keep it on your desk or put it on the wall. So you don't have to know all these things. You can always refer a family to us to process this. If you say, like, I know they said something about child find, call this agency, they will be able to help walk you through it. I know that this is a lot of information for people, but we can always back you up. Or you can call us and say, what did you say about that? Because I want to know this for myself. But I just want you to know there is a kind of a safety net to help you remember this information and support families.
You know, I'm thinking that when we do this presentation again, maybe one of our first slides should be a fire hose, because I do feel like giving you all this information is sort of like drinking from a fire hose. So we apologize for that. The other really good thing to know about CPAC is that if you have a family that you have concerns about a child's development and you're starting to have that conversation with the family, but they're not quite there yet, and they need to just be able to have a conversation with another parent, CPAC is a fabulous resource. Sometimes it can be really difficult for parents of young children sometimes when you're the first messenger that there's something that may be, you know, amiss with a child's development in a particular area, and they need to speak with somebody who sort of walked a mile in their moccasins. So I make a lot of referrals to CPAC so families can speak to another parent who has a lot of really great information and training and can share their personal experiences as well. I think that everything comes down to relationships and being able to have that relationship with the family to be able to have those, you know, difficult conversations. CPAC can be really helpful.
Andrea, can you answer the question in the chat? So they have to be in the public school system to access this support. Just to be clear.
School districts are required from the time a child turns 3 up until the end, until they turn 22, if a child is eligible for special education and related services, to provide these services. A child or a student does have to be enrolled in the school district to access these services. So a child that's homeschooled would not receive special education. Does that answer your question, Patty?
But they can access the evaluation through Child Find to see if they are an eligible student. So that's what I wanted to be sure. They can't receive special ed without being a student, but they can receive the evaluation and the determination of eligibility, even as a homeschool student.
Great. So we can go on to our next slide. I don't think I have to talk a whole lot about this because you just, sounds like you just recently, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. In my mind, I skipped ahead one slide. I do have to talk about this. So Connecticut has been doing lots of great things. And another piece of legislation that went into effect on July 1 of this past summer, 2021, is we have actually sort of upped our ante in Connecticut with our child find responsibilities for both birth to 3 and for school districts. So if a child is transitioning between Part C, early intervention, and Part B, preschool special education, and they're found not eligible, and Nicole probably even knows the percentage of how, you know, of kiddos found not eligible, both Part C and Part B have responsibilities. So what happens is a family is then given an actual piece of paper from Part C, and Nicole, jump in if I'm missing anything. They're actually given a piece of paper with information about Sparkler. And they can have a conversation with their birth to 3 provider about what Sparkler is and why it's a good idea for them to enroll. School districts then have a responsibility to then touch base with the family of any child who has been determined not eligible. So it's okay, you can go to the next slide, that's fine. So one of the things that we have done is we have actually developed a report that school districts get that shows every child who is found not eligible. The school district does not know if they signed up for Sparkler, but they have to send out communication to the children, the families of the children who were found not eligible. And you guys already know about Sparkler. And I'm going to turn it over to Jane to talk a little bit about Pyramid, because we also have the Pyramid logo on this slide, and that's an important thing for you to know about.
Sure. So Andrea and I both serve on the state leadership team for Pyramid. Pyramid is it's a framework of resources to address challenging behavior. And they have a pile, I know we shared this with the state library last year, a pile of resources that are family resources, provider resources, and they are going to be on the Sparkler app. So if a family has a child with challenging behavior and they're using the Sparkler app to track their child's development, and the information goes to the app that says there's a challenge, the app will give the parent some suggestions of things to do. And Connecticut is infusing the pyramid interventions into those responses. And so that's a research-based set of interventions that help a family know how to address challenging behaviors on their own through the app, with good descriptors and good guidance on how to implement that simple intervention. And it's a whole set of resources that really we as a parent organization provide them to families all the time. They're usually very simple to apply and to implement, I guess is the right word. And so this is going to be an amazing resource for families if they put in the information in the app, and the app will come back and say, why don't you try these things? And so Pyramid is also on the OEC website for people to go even further and deeper. And there's a lot of one-pagers that you could print and share in a play group if you have children with any particular challenges. So it's unique to Connecticut that the Pyramid resources are going to be on there. We're really hopeful that this will help the families that are having these challenges to have some good, immediate. They don't have the birth to 3 provider in their house anymore. So now they have somebody else kind of connecting their need to a good resource to address the challenge. Anything else either one of you guys want to say about Pyramid?
I think you hit it on it all. Andrea, you agree?
Yep, absolutely.
I also just want to let folks know that I did drop, while we were talking, I was able to upload the Sparkler video. I've been having YouTube issues. So for anyone who was not able to attend the Sparkler presentation last week, or anyone who maybe had to leave early because of, library life, I have dropped the link in the chat. I'll also be sending it out, and the Children in Line newsletter comes out later this month, and it'll be in there as well. Sorry to interrupt y'all.
Oh, no, thank you, Kim. We really just wanted to briefly touch upon a very important meeting that happens during the transition between Part C and Part B. There's something called the transition meeting or transition conference. I put the link to this little infographic in the chat for you. If you hear parents talking about this, we just want to let you know that this is a birth to 3 meeting that the district attends. And that it's really to start forming that relationship between the families and the school district. And you can take a look at, if you're interested, at this infographic, and it'll give you a little bit more information as to what occurs at that transition meeting. But that is probably, if you have a parent that's transitioning, that's one of the first things they're going to experience with regard to this move from Part C to Part B.
This one is me, because it's all about the relationships. And when you think about families, the families are at the center of these relationships. It's really important when you are the parent of a very young child who has disabilities. Imagine the life of that family. They have all kinds of things going on in their life. They may have a lot of professionals involved in their life, and it can be very overwhelming. When you have a birth to 3 provider who really understands what you're going through and is a great relationship, it's wonderful. However, you're also letting them go when you move on to preschool, which can be very difficult. I can't tell you how many of my staff still communicate with their old birth to 3 providers. If they have any question 6 years later, they may text them and say, hey, what do you think? Even though the kid is now 9. Developing those relationships are what makes birth to 3 so important. And then the family knows how to do that well. Our goal is to help transition that trust and relationship to the preschool team so that that family can continue to have positive relationships with the people at the new school, at the new program that they're interacting with. But as I said in the other slide, it's also the relationship between the providers and the districts that matter. If they trust each other and they work collaboratively, that family is going to have a much smoother transition than people who only communicate every once in a while through email about data. They have to be talking about this student and really understanding who this student is or will be when they become a student. And so I could spend 6 weeks talking about how important relationships are, but when they're not there, it really is a detriment to the family. And so anything, you guys are a perfect community resource to help families understand that relationships are valuable. Sometimes it's hard when you're a parent of a child with needs to not be angry. And if you're in an early stage of grief, you may be very angry. And so that's not really a great start to a relationship. And you may not be angry at anything but life because your child has to suffer, but it could impact their ability to participate in a good, healthy relationship that is about development for that child. So it's just really important that we all recognize that collaboration and relationships are critical to any success for our children.
And one thing we'd like to highlight today as well is, along with relationships, that also begins with the Part C, or the early interventionist, forming those relationships with the local education agencies in their towns of the families that they're supporting, but also with the families. And Andrea alluded to this as well, but Connecticut's state identified measurable results. So this is federally reported on. This is another thing that Connecticut takes with stride, is that as a result of early intervention, families will be better able to talk about their child's abilities and challenges. And I'll let Jane talk about how this perhaps influences those transition conferences and PPTs, because the role of early intervention shifts slightly. Jane, do you want to talk about how that looks? Okay.
Right. So birth to three providers are really not expected to advocate on behalf of families. So their role, part of this identified measurable result, is one of their roles is to help families be able to articulate what they know about their child. Because if a family goes to a PPT and says, my child has autism, that doesn't really tell a preschool team anything. They really need to be able to break it down and talk specifically about their abilities and their challenges. So my child struggles with being able to do anything with his fine motor. He can't button buttons and he can't. It's much more descriptive and helps the team visualize what this child they have not met yet might be able to do or not be able to do. And so it's really important that the family has the language they need to communicate, to be able to be heard, and for people to really understand what this child is capable of or needs assistance with. So we work really hard with families to do this, and the providers do this also, so that families are heard at their meeting, and the birth to three provider could prompt them and say, what did you want to say about your child's use of their hands? But it's really the parent's responsibility to talk about their child's strengths and needs. And we want them to do that in a way that it really is meaningful.
So just to recap with regard to birth to three and PPTs and our school districts, is that PPTs are the school district responsibilities. Birth to three should always be invited to the PPT. And just as Jane had said, birth to three is there to support the family. They're not there as an advocate for the child. They're there to support the family so the family can be the advocate for the child. And that's important for you to know. I think families sometimes have that really deep relationship with their birth to three provider, and sometimes that role release can be challenging at times. But we just want to make sure that you had sort of the underpinnings of all that. And then we're going to have Jane, we'll go to the next slide. And just in general, I think that the three of us have agreed this is one of the most important slides we have in the whole presentation.
Oh, that's no pressure. So how can you use this process as an opportunity to build positive relationships? And trust is certainly really one of the most important aspects of building a positive relationship. And what I really like to say is, because my birth to three provider really helped me to trust her. I mean, we don't only trust them, we become dependent upon them, but they're really good at helping us not be dependent upon them. But if I trust her and she trusts the school person, and she says, hey, meet my friend Andrea, who's going to be your family's next point of contact at the school, and they have a positive relationship, how positive is that for that family to say, oh, I'm so happy to meet you, Andrea. I hear Nicole says so many good things about you, and now I'm able to maybe advance that trust a little bit towards Andrea. But I think when you talk about a parent with a young child with a disability, it's really hard to trust. It's really hard for me to put my child who doesn't speak in the hands of people I don't know. I had a mom call me who only spoke Spanish, and we used a translator, and she said, they want me to put my kid in a school where I don't know anybody. Like, what are they thinking? And I thought, I can't believe more parents don't call us and ask us that. But she was adamant. She had older children that were in a school, and she wanted her child in that school because she knew all the people there, and she already had trust with them. And she could not believe that they would expect her to take her fragile little baby and put them with people that she has never met. And so that was really important for them to help her get to know that team, see where it is, bring her in, show her what the school is going to look like, give some opportunity to build that trust before you expect them to leave their little precious bundle with a group of strangers that they've never met before. So there are a lot of ways that that can be done, but it's really critical that trust is recognized. And I think as librarians, you can offer that same thing. If you have relationships with your town's preschool, you can say, I've been there. It's great. They come and they do our playgroup every once in a while. You know, that would really go a long way for parents to feel good about the next step that they might be taking. Anybody have any questions at this point?
Yes, I've changed the settings. So if anyone has, I know sometimes questions are like hard to type because there's like lots of words you want to say. So if anyone would like to unmute, just raise your hand so I can see on you and call on you and keep it organized.
Nicole, can you, maybe if you unshare, we can see the whole gallery if anybody raises their hand.
Scroll through to see if any real hands are up too. Sometimes
Or feel free to unmute since Kim gave you that option. If you have any questions or need any resources, let us know.
I'm wondering from a state perspective, we at the State Library have recently begun to work with CERC, the State Education Resource Center, and they've been featured in some of our presentations and workshops. There might be some folks who are beginning to become familiar with those letters and the folks over there. Do you guys do any work with them?
We do lots and lots of work with the State Education Resource Center. You'll really see a mix, especially for preschool special ed, with the RESCs, the Regional Education Service Centers, and CERC with regard to training, technical assistance, and just different opportunities that are available to school districts and to families as well. Part of that is because CERC has absolutely fabulous resources about special education and about equity, but they don't have a lot of manpower in the area of early childhood right now. So you will tend to see things coming out of the RESCs for preschool special ed, but CERC is a fabulous resource.
Great, that's great to know. Oh, and I see some folks, yeah, we've had some skedaddles because of just whatever's happening in libraries. So thank you, Kate, for coming. And again, I did drop the recording to Sparkler in the chat. Everyone knows this is recorded, so this will be in a newsletter that comes out on the 15th, around the 15th, I don't know. And also on the listservs, just for the folks who are here. Well, I mean, if we've run over a little bit, so if we don't have any questions, that's not to say folks won't reach out to you all personally or me personally to pass questions on to you. So I just really want to thank you, Andrea, Jean, Nicole. I knew this was going to be worth it. You have so many fantastic resources, and you know, while the worlds of education or like the school systems and the worlds of libraries, particularly public libraries, aren't the same. We in public libraries, I say we like I'm still there. Oh my God, I miss it so much. Can have an amazing bond with families, sort of similar to what Jane was saying and alluding to, and just to know that there are resources out there that we can guide folks to when they come to us, parents and caretakers, is just so helpful because we don't have all the answers, but because we're libraries, it's assumed that we do. But this is definitely some information that can go into our toolkit and our repertoire to pass along to parents and caretakers, folks who are homeschooled and maybe didn't even know that these resources exist if they want to transition to traditional school. So this was so helpful. Thank you so much. And I just thank you for giving us a piece of your rainy Friday.
Thank you for having us, and hope all of you have a wonderful weekend and happy Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you, and to you all as well.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, folks.